The village of Akose, nestled between rolling hills and the dense forests of eastern Ghana, was a place bound by tradition. Its people lived according to the rhythms of nature, guided by the wisdom of their ancestors. But in Akose, love was rarely enough to challenge the weight of duty and expectations. Kwame, the village's most respected hunter, had always known this. At 26, he had earned the admiration of his peers not only for his strength and skill but also for his quiet leadership. He moved through the forest like a shadow, tracking game deep into the wilderness, always returning with food for his people. Despite his courage and strength, Kwame had only one true weakness: Afia. Afia, at 24, was known throughout the village as a healer. Her late mother had passed down the knowledge of herbs, and Afia's gentle touch had healed countless villagers. She was beautiful, yes, but it was her wisdom and kindness that drew people to her. And though her heart belonged to Kwame, their love was not one celebrated by tradition or fate. For Afia was promised to another, Kojo, the wealthy son of a powerful merchant from the neighboring village of Akumu. Kojo's family had offered a bride price so generous that the village elders, led by Afia's uncle, the chief, had accepted it without question. Kojo, dressed in fine clothing and dripping with gold, was everything Kwame was not. To Kojo, Afia was not a woman to love, but a political prize and an opportunity to elevate his family's status and secure his place among the powerful. The union, arranged by the chief, was meant to secure the future of Akose, the village that had endured years of hardship. The elders, their faces lined with the weight of age and experience, saw only the benefits. To them, Afia's personal desires were irrelevant. Her marriage to Kojo would bring prosperity, stability, and strength. One afternoon, as the sun bathed the village in warm light, Kojo stood proudly in the center of Akose, his fine attire shimmering under the gaze of the villagers. His expression was one of indifference as he cast a casual glance toward Afia, who stood at a distance, her eyes filled with sorrow. Dressed in her simple village attire, she looked out of place in the spectacle Kojo had created around himself. The chief, standing beside Kojo, smiled broadly as he addressed the crowd. "The union between our village and Akumu will secure the future of Akose," the chief declared, his voice booming. "This marriage is not just about Afia, it is about all of us. Prosperity is within our grasp." Villagers nodded in approval, some murmuring in agreement, others watching Afia with pity. They knew she did not love Kojo, but tradition held fast. What was good for the village came before personal feelings. As the village square buzzed with whispers, Kwame watched from the shadows, his heart burning with frustration. He had loved Afia for years, though their love had grown in silence, hidden from the eyes of the elders. They had dreamt of a future together, but that future seemed impossible now. Later that evening, as the light of the setting sun gave way to dusk, the village elders gathered in the council hut. The air was thick with the scent of burning herbs, and a heavy silence filled the room. Afia's uncle, the chief, sat at the head of the gathering, his expression firm as he spoke. "This marriage will bring us the wealth and stability Akose needs," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The bride price offered by Kojo's family is far too great an opportunity to pass up. It will ensure that our people survive any hardship, any drought or famine that might come." The elders, seated in a semicircle around the chief, nodded in agreement. Their faces were worn by time and experience, their decisions shaped by the traditions they had upheld for generations. One elder, his voice measured, spoke cautiously. "Kwame is a good man," he said, "but he cannot offer what Kojo can." The chief's expression remained unchanged. "Kwame is a protector of this village, but Kojo is the future. This union will happen, for the good of Akose." As the days passed, Kwame grew more desperate. He knew that he could not compete with Kojo's wealth or his political influence, but he could not bear the thought of losing Afia. His heart ached with the weight of his helplessness, and he found himself wandering the forest late into the night, searching for answers. One evening, he decided to visit Nana Kwesi, the village's spiritual guide. Nana Kwesi had lived for nearly a century, his wisdom sought by villagers in times of need. His small hut, nestled deep in the forest, was a place of mystery, where the lines between the physical world and the spiritual world blurred. Kwame approached Nana Kwesi's hut under the cover of darkness, the faint glow of the moon lighting his path. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of burning herbs and the hum of ancient chants. The old man sat cross-legged by a small fire, his eyes closed in meditation. "Nana," Kwame said softly, kneeling before him. "I need your help." Nana Kwesi opened his eyes slowly, his gaze sharp despite his age. "You come to me with a heart full of love but weighed down by sorrow. What is it you seek?" "I cannot lose Afia," Kwame replied, his voice trembling with desperation. "There must be a way to stop the wedding. There must be something I can do." Nana Kwesi sighed, his eyes drifting to the fire. "Love is a powerful force, Kwame, but it does not always bend to the will of men. The ancestors have already woven their patterns, and fate is difficult to alter." Kwame's fists clenched, determination filling his voice. "I will do anything." The old man's expression darkened as he reached for a small, intricately carved gourd from a nearby shelf. "There is a way," he said slowly, "but the price is high. The spirits of the forest, the old ones who reside in the shadows, can alter fate. But once you make this bargain, your life will never be the same. You will no longer walk among the living as a man." Kwame leaned forward, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. "Tell me what I must do." Nana Kwesi handed him the gourd. "Take this to the sacred grove at dawn. Drink from it when the first light touches the trees, and the spirits will hear your plea. But know this, once the bargain is made, you will be bound to the forest, forever watching over the village but never again part of it." Kwame ventured deep into the sacred grove, a place where the spirits of the forest were said to reside. The trees here were ancient, their branches heavy with the weight of time, their roots twisting deep into the earth. The air was thick with the presence of the old ones, the spirits who had watched over Akose for generations. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Kwame uncorked the gourd and drank its contents. A warmth spread through his body, and for a brief moment, he felt light and free. But then the world around him began to shift. From the shadows, the spirits emerged, formless beings of mist and light, their voices a chorus of whispers that echoed through the grove. "You wish to alter fate," they said, their voices surrounding him. "But fate demands a price." "I accept," Kwame replied, his voice steady. The spirits swirled around him, and Kwame's body began to change. His limbs elongated, his skin darkened and hardened, and within moments, he was no longer Kwame the man, but a magnificent black bird. His eyes glowed with the light of the spirits, and he felt a deep connection to the forest, as though its ancient roots had intertwined with his very soul. "You are bound to us now," the spirits whispered. "You will watch over Akose, but you will never walk among your people again." The morning of Afia's wedding dawned bright and warm. The village square was adorned with colorful cloths and flowers, and the sound of drums echoed through the air. Villagers gathered in anticipation, waiting for the moment when Afia would be wed to Kojo, sealing the fate of Akose. Afia, dressed in a gown of gold and beads, stood at the center of the ceremony, her heart heavy with sorrow. She had resigned herself to her fate, knowing that her personal desires had been sacrificed for the good of the village. But as the ceremony began, a roar echoed through the village, sending a shiver through the crowd. The villagers stood in shock as a massive black bird emerged from the forest, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. The bird's presence sent waves of fear through the crowd, and many stepped back in horror. But Afia did not flinch. She stepped forward, her eyes locking with the bird's. In that moment, she knew. "Kwame," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. The bird let out a low growl, its powerful form tense with emotion. Afia reached out, her hand trembling as she touched its sleek black fur. A single tear fell from her cheek as the realization of Kwame's sacrifice washed over her. The village chief, recognizing the significance of the bird's arrival, declared that the wedding could not continue. "This is a sign from the ancestors," he said, his voice filled with reverence. "The spirits have spoken." Kojo, furious at the disruption, stormed away, leaving Afia standing alone with the creature that had once been the man she loved. From that day on, Kwame remained in the forest, bound to the land he had once roamed as a man. He watched over Akose, protecting it from harm, but he could never again walk among his people. Afia, though heartbroken, found solace in knowing that Kwame's sacrifice had saved her from a life she did not want. She never married, instead dedicating her life to healing and caring for the people of Akose. And though she lived the rest of her days with purpose, she often found herself wandering the edge of the forest, where the bird would appear, silently watching her from the shadows. In the quiet moments, when the village slept and the moon hung high in the sky, Afia would sit by the river, and the bird would sit beside her, their spirits bound by a love that transcended time and space. Kwame had given everything for love, and though they could never be together again in life, their souls would remain entwined forever, a reminder that true love, no matter the cost, never dies. Thank you for watching The Love Birds of Akose. We hope you enjoyed this story of love, sacrifice, and eternal connection. If you'd like to hear more captivating tales, please support us by subscribing to our channel and stay tuned for more updates. See you in the next story.